أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear brothers and sisters, and welcome to yet another episode of Real Talk. This is the second night in a row that we're coming to you, which is quite unusual outside of Ramadan, but it's a big end to the week here at National Zakat Foundation, and very excited to be doing today's very topical episode with you, inshallah. So a little bit about today's conversation and what we're hoping to cover, for those of you who may not have been following what's happening on social media. For the last couple of weeks and for the next few weeks, the National Zakat Foundation's Australian branch will be looking at the issue of addictions in our community. Addictions to all sorts of things. Now, addictions are a bit of a taboo topic in the Muslim community for obvious and understandable reasons, or perhaps not for obvious and understandable reasons once you dig under the surface. But the reality is that they're not given the attention that they deserve. There's often a stigma that follows people who have fallen into them for sometimes reasons entirely outside of their control. And so the idea with this campaign has been to dig under the surface of the issue of addictions and look at how they impact not just the individuals involved, but how they become a communal issue, how they impact on families, how they impact on communities, how they have a ripple effect beyond just the individual, and why it's therefore so important for us as a community to tackle this as a community-wide problem, to embrace the people who go through these issues and to help them get out the other side a better and healthier version of themselves, for themselves and their families. So we've been running that campaign for the last couple of weeks, and today's conversation is really a culmination of that in some ways, to address the issue from the viewpoint of two great brothers in our community who are doing fantastic work, two of many people, it must be said, but two very much at the coalface of it all. And so I'm very delighted and excited to have them with me here today, and I'll talk to them a little bit about what their work is just in a little bit. But it would be quite remiss of me not to mention that one of the things that has really allowed and given people who are experiencing the impacts of these addictions a second lease on life, if you will, is the help and support of people who are involved in this issue in our community, and in its work as an organization, as a charity, as a network provider. NZF is also doing very important work. So as part of this particular campaign, NZF is raising money to be able to channel those funds into some of the programs that it hosts and it manages in order to connect people who are undergoing the impact of addictions with the right service providers out there. So NZF's model, as some of you may know, is not about doing everything itself. It is there with community service providers, with community partners who deliver the services on the ground to people who need it most. So if you are interested in helping our community get to the other side of some of these issues, then please do consider, especially with Jum'ah being right around the corner, it's about to be Maghrib time in about an hour, please do consider on this blessed day, on the upcoming blessed day of Jum'ah, giving a little bit of sadaqah in order to help NZF achieve its very important objectives in this area, inshallah. Now, today's topic we want to look at is all about the concept of I'm addicted, can I get over this? We want to look at the issue of addiction from a range of angles. We want to look at it from the perspective of the person who's addicted, from the perspective of their family and the impacts that it has, and ultimately with view to answering the question, can I get over this? And so we're going to have some brothers with us who are very well versed in this particular issue and are probably as well placed as anyone in our community to answer this question. We want to give some practical support, advice, hope to people who may be going through some of this stuff, and to those people around them in terms of how they can help uplift them and sort of help conquer this particular issue of addictions over a range of different types, whether it's drugs, gambling, alcohol, pornography, and so forth. So we're looking forward to this one for a while, and I'd like to introduce, inshallah, our brothers Tegs and Brother Hamad. Brothers, welcome to Real Talk. How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah.
Great to have you here. So what I'll do is I'll just quickly get each of you to tell us a little bit about the work that you do, whether it's in this space or generally as professionals. Hamad, I might start with you, brother. Why don't you acquaint us? I know you've been on Real Talk about 1.5 or so years ago, but tell us a little bit about what you do and why this topic, when we spoke to you about it, was so interesting to you.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Once again, Jazakallah khair for allowing us to come on this panel and to keep talking about the issues that I guess we're very passionate about, which is where the motivation stems from to do this kind of work. I'm the founder of the Rehabilitation Project. I'm a registered counsellor. with the Australian Counselling Association. I work in mental health and homelessness during my day job for an organisation called Nimoy National. And so I guess the focus of the rehabilitation project has always been around targeted at the Muslim community, because there's so much other great works happening in the mainstream sector by, you know, the Christian organisations, the non-denominational organisation, the Judaism faith organisations. They're doing great work in that space for their communities, and it's always sort of thing. So we kind of were inclined. I was inclined to chase this path, you know, and by no means this all stemmed from tragedy. This all stems from lived experience. This all stems from a lack of a community, I guess, infrastructure around faith inclusion, cultural, you know, service provision, all that kind of stuff. So this is what stems my drive and my motivation to do this kind of work. Alhamdulillah. So when I say the founder of the Rehabilitation Project, it's a registered not-for-profit health promotion, harm prevention charities with the Australian charities, the ACNC, and alhamdulillah, we are about to get our accreditation from ACES, which is the Australian Services Excellence Standard. We engage with all the mainstream sort of services to get advice and to consult with best practice and the mainstream standards, if you like, and we engage with a lot of those services. So this is, in a nutshell, this is what we're trying to do. And yeah, I'll just pass the tags.
Tags will raise off, bro.
Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Basically, I do have a couple of hats which I wear. So I'm a behavioural practitioner. I'm a rehabilitation counsellor by profession. I provide specialist behavioural interventions for those who have a disability, as well as a senior clinician for a culturally appropriate service called Hayat House, where we provide specialist counselling, individual and both group therapy, support, as well as case management and referral pathways for those of Qadi backgrounds, as well as non-Muslim and Muslim backgrounds. So there are a few hats here, but I mean, you asked what's my passion, and really my drive is providing the best and utmost best support for in the AOD sector, or drugs and alcohol, so to speak. Seeing a few trials and certain events in my life which has impacted me on a personal level, and it's really allowed me to foster my own sort of pathway in drugs and alcohol.
Alhamdulillah. Fantastic. Mohammed, I might start with you on the topic that we've got itself, and Jazakumullah khair, brothers, for the fantastic sort of little introduction to what you're doing and why you're doing it. Let's talk about addiction, right? The core topic that we're here to discuss today, and what we've been discussing over the course of this campaign with the community. And it's been a very interesting campaign. I'm not sure if you've seen some of what NZF has done in regards to this particular issue, but there's been a lot of messaging that's been put out there on social media, and true to I guess the taboo nature of the topic, there's been a lot of interesting comments from people, right?
I noticed.
Which you would have noticed, and it's mind-boggling, right? It's like, so what NZF has been trying to do, obviously, is to lift this issue out from under the carpet, right? And it's confronting for people, right? It's almost like it's shameful that we're talking. That's almost a connotation sometimes, right? Why? And privately, and not just privately, but publicly, there is some amazing outpouring of support, right? It's like, finally someone who's talking about it, right? So NZF, we sent an email out last week as part of the promotion for this episode about pornography, right? Pornography addiction, how bad it is in the community. It's a form of addiction, right? And we got beautiful responses from people like, finally there's someone talking about this. And there was one brother, subhanAllah, who wrote to us and said, I have been addicted to this issue for so long, it ruined my life, it ruined my marriage, ruined my children. But I want people to talk about this, and I want people to tell others that there's someone who's been through it, gotten out the other side, and educate people that they're not alone, right?
So the concept of why that's so important is, let's say, if we have a duty of care, as a community, as a society, we have a duty of care, and I think that if you notice there's harm coming from one angle, I'm sure someone would go back to the community and say, there's a storm coming, or there's a pack of lions just left the zoo, right? It's natural inclination, disposition to want to minimize harm and reduce harm. And harm minimization is actually, it's a framework in our religion, right? Don't come near adultery. Don't sip alcohol because in a large amount intoxicates, it's not good. So the framework of our faith is harm minimization, right? It's primary prevention, actually. And so when our community is faced with these issues, I think it is important to talk about it.
Yeah.
100%.
So let's talk about addiction and how it develops, right? Tell us about that a little bit. How do people in your experience, how do addictions develop into becoming, full-blown addictions?
Look, in the context of, if we don't want to talk about drugs, and I'm sure you can, simulate a lot of other things to it, there's stages, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like one day
Wake
wake
up
up and you're in full-blown addiction,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I like to I sort of made it like a little model, or if you like, where it starts off with curiosity. Then it goes to experimental, more experimental. Then it goes to recreational. Then it goes to functional. Functional is where you're going to play with the danger now. Now it's like it's a everyday type thing. Then from functional, everyday, goes then your tolerance starts to build. Tolerance.
Yeah.
The more you do it, the more the tolerance builds. The more you're tolerant to the drug, to the substance, to the addiction, to the visual. The more the tolerance builds, the more you become more dependent on it. So now you can't function without it. Dependence builds. You become more dependent to the point that if you don't actually have it, you cannot function at all. The withdrawal
body gets
starts to
used to
kick in. That's right. Withdrawal starts to kick in. And I always, in my workshops, and I think I played the video Nuggets. If you haven't seen Nuggets, go online on YouTube. Just type in Nuggets, NUGGETS, right?
Yeah.
I haven't had my sleep. All right, and it's a 4-minute video, 4.5-minute video, and it depicts a journey which may take a month, it may take 6 months, may take a year, And what I wanted to highlight as well is in the functional stage, what that's how I sort of chronological levels of it. Medical issues come in. Medications come in at the functional level, not so much at the experimental. Perhaps from GP, trauma, people need kind of, and so that when someone experiences that experience, it then becomes straight into functionals. No more curiosity. It's been, it interjects elsewhere.
Yeah.
Some people have trauma, PTSD. So, but generally speaking, it starts off someone curious in the park at school. And there's stages of it. And initially, and look, it's very unfortunate that we only get phone calls when the families are in crisis mode, because naturally speaking, they want to sort of solve it themselves, right? Keep it in-house. Let's try to do this. Let's try to do that, which is very good. You need to preserve don't expose. Confidentiality is very, very important. We talk about confidentiality in our work. It's very important in the actual family unit as well. Don't tell the uncles and aunties, and keep the individual, safe. Yeah, and then even get a professional. But they're definitely the stages. They progress really quickly, based on the substance and how addictive it is.
What about things like trauma and something going wrong in a person's life? What's that sort of pathway towards addiction look like?
So again, I think when someone has a profound traumatic event, I don't think curiosity.
Yeah, curiosity wouldn't be applicable.
Wouldn't be the starting point, right? It would have to be something they've experienced before that they weren't necessarily addicted to, and so it presents as a good option, as a relief, as a coping mechanism, and so the person, because of the trauma, because of the pressure, and no other healthy alternative outlet, this option all of a sudden seems, like a good option.
And then it just goes down the same pathway that you mentioned, level upon level upon level of attachment to that thing. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what does the cycle of addiction look like once someone is addicted? So what sort of things do you see happen? So obviously not from the phasing perspective, which you've already spoken about, but
Yes.
What sort of things can it then lead to feed that addiction, to satisfy that addiction?
So by the time someone is fully addicted to a substance, it becomes the primary, rotating, if you like, around their life. So from the time they wake up, That's the first thing on their mind. How am I going to get on it? How am I going to score? If I don't get on it, I'm going to get sick. I can't go to work. I
Right.
can't function. If I don't take this medication, I'm going to start to go into I need to speak to my parents. I need to go to work tomorrow. I need to answer this phone calls. I need to do this email. So by then, functionality becomes dependent on the substance. So what the cycle of addiction does, there's a few models of what it looks like, but there's one, and I actually like this one a lot. It starts with an internal frustration. Then it goes to fantasizing. Then you fantasize about it because you have an internal frustration, right? You fantasize, how can I get rid of this internal frustration?
Right.
Boom, a resource pops up. It's something you've experienced before. Someone presents something to you. Then you start obsessing about that thing. You obsess about it until you just can't stop thinking about it. Use the substance, lose control, guilt of use, shame, you stop using it, time passes, you forget
The guilt. Yep.
the shame and the guilt,
Yep.
and internal frustration kicks in again, where you're not dealing with those issues in a healthy, positive way. Whether it's at home, you can't talk to your parents about your issues, whether it's at school, you can't express yourself to the counsellor or the teacher, whether it's wherever it is.
Yep.
It's important to note that when we're looking at it in terms of the cycle, right, is that many individuals who, for example, may, demonstrate substance use disorder as a behavior, is that you'll find that they may be in a different stage of recovery. So it sort of really depends if they may be in early or mid or late. The cycle may look different from person to person. So their journey for what one person may be experiencing may look completely different to the other. But obviously there are so many variable factors which may impact that cycle. But what we do know is, in terms of the readiness for change, is the way that us as individuals, we tend to process our thoughts, and what may just be an involuntary thought may lead to contemplating, and then you would start to individuals may find themselves preparing for it, and once they're prepared for it, they start to act upon it. So there's motivations to perform whatever it may be in substance use, in the context of substance use disorders. What you mentioned before, it could be trauma driven. And I mean, there may have been a catalyst for using substances because of that traumatic experience. And for some, like what Mohammed Fenja was saying, it comes back down to coping mechanisms. For others, there's generational trauma as well. For others, I mean, there's multiple complexities when it comes to trauma. But what we know is it can exacerbate the behavior even more.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what you said there, Tex, was beautiful, and I just wanted to highlight something just to add to that, is that during the cycle of addiction, the readiness to change changes based on the cycle. You get me? So when someone's obsessing and they've got accessibility, they've got opportunity, it's very difficult to say no.
Yeah.
When someone's in the guilt phase, the shame, they've just blew all their money,
Yep.
mum's not talking to them,
Yep.
they're about to lose their job,
Yep.
perhaps they're ready to change at that moment.
Yeah.
Okay, so circumstances, situations, environments also may shape decision making.
Yeah. Gotcha. Tegs, let's talk a little bit about, so we're talking about substance addiction there. How applicable is that sort of logic or that cycle to other forms of addiction?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we're talking about it from a diagnostic point of view, what we do know is that drugs and alcohol, in other words, substance use disorders, is a known disorder, which is classified in the DSM. When we're talking about with other addictions, what we do know is that the only classification of a behavioral addiction is pathological gambling. However, there are many other addictive behaviors, so to speak, that again may have some similarities in terms of compulsiveness, impulsivity, obsessiveness, right? And so it's important to understand that with drugs and alcohol, it is a classified classified addiction.
But some of the other are not. So there's no pornography addiction that you'd find in the DSM or something like that?
No, there isn't. However, there's certain characteristics
that are
of
shared.
it which, is shared.
And so are there a lot of shared characteristics between these different types of addiction? Like, is the brain working in a certain way for people to be doing those things again and again, whether it's feeding yourself literally a chemical substance, or watching something all day long, or going to a pokey and just pulling the bar? Is there a similar way that it works?
So definitely speaking, when you come to I'm definitely not a neuroscientist.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a lot of research around the neural pathways
Yes.
and the reward systems, and forgive my parable, but if an animal, if you put water and think something that it is desirable for him there constantly, he'll end up coming there by himself, right?
Yeah.
This is obviously when your consequential thinking goes offline, and you sort of obsessive thinking about one particular thing. Definitely has a profound impact on the mind and feel-good chemicals, and what drives you to feel good. What's that drive to feel good? So obviously you're in a state of discontentment, and I want to mention this right now. The primary objective of Shaitan is to create a sense of discontentment, so that he makes you in a state of chase. And when someone's in a state of chase, he's in a state of highly suggestiveness. If those two words go together, but you're in a highly suggestive state because you don't feel good. You stay in a discontentment, and you want to feel good. That's why Allah says, that. وَلَا تَجِدُ أَكْثَرَهُم شَاكِرِينَ. I'm going to come from their right, from their left, from behind, from the front. And the key to that, وَلَا تَجِدُ أَكْثَرَهُم شَاكِرِينَ, you're not going to find most of them grateful or content. And so like we were talking about earlier, it's a high-paced society we live in.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
feel-goods are like right in front of you. It's
absolutely.
very quick decisions, right? So your brain likes that.
When we're talking about it from how it impacts the brain, is that what we mentioned about the shared characteristics, and when we're talking about the way the brain reacts, what we do know according to research is that it's definitely rerouting the pathways of the brain. What we deem it might be reward driven, it might be what increases our motivation. So amongst the known disorders is that you'll find there's what Brother Muhammad Finch was saying, you have the tolerance, withdrawal and dependent stage, but I mean amongst all those disorders, they're all highly stigmatized, and so it's important that when we are addressing it, we meet the needs of the individual or the community at large.
Let's talk about impacts of addictions, right? Before we talk about how to get out the other side and give people some hope. What do addictions do to people? What sort of behaviors? So at the moment we've talked about it somewhat theoretically, right? In terms of the reward and sort of pathways, and the theoretical model for explaining how it goes from experimental to recreational to functional to outright addiction. What's the real impact of this stuff? And I want to start with you, coming at it more from the sort of AOD perspective that you do. Tell us a little bit about that. Like, what can this stuff do to people for the benefit of those of our listeners and community members who maybe have not seen someone with a drug addiction or haven't known someone?
Absolutely. I think, the impact of addiction, it doesn't discriminate amongst different backgrounds, religions or race. The physiological effects are very much the same, right? And we're talking about, there could be, for example, mentally or psychologically a lack of motivation. Physically, there might be a loss of appetite, changes in the way their body is shaped. When we're talking about it from an interpersonal point of view, is that it causes burden amongst relationships, amongst family and friends, and on more complex or more complicated side is that it can also lead to legal implications. It could, in extreme situations, you can lose custody of children, right? And so I feel as though the impact of addiction is quite severe. And if not addressed early, and if we don't implement early interventions, then we're looking at and a societal issue that is very hard to manage.
Yeah. Mohammed, what would you say?
Two things. I think from the individual's perspective, it's definitely a very profound internal conflict between the relationship dealing with the outside and the relationship dealing with the inside. That has a profound impact on the individual themselves as well, on their mental health, physical health, spiritual health, psychological health. Those behaviors then impact external relationships. And so, like Tex was saying, the financial, legal, the medical, social, the families. Like when I get a case, I'm not dealing with just the brother. I'm dealing with the father just as much. Sometimes it's the mother just as much. Sometimes it's the brother or the sister. And so it's like a ripple effect. It's like a ripple effect, subhanAllah.
Yeah.
You know, from in my line of work, you know, subhanAllah, I've been, you know, as I, you know, been working as a clinician for 3 years, and especially around these communities, and you know what I've seen is, you know, broken families who, you know, and I'm sure Fenj has observed it as well, where families have been isolated because it's so highly stigmatizing. Is that families don't really know how to address it, and because there may be some cultural barriers and language barriers, it's like, hey, where do I go to for help? And so, you know what, for example, the behaviors that they may see in a loved one that's experiencing, you know, the calamity of a substance use disorder, is to them is they actually don't know how to deal with it, right? And so, you know, they may perceive certain expectations of recovery. However, what we do know is it might not, you know,
Play out that way.
it might not play out that way, right? And you know, with that journey again of addiction, that impact of it, you know, it can stem from you know, for example, adolescence, and that impact may be severe, right? And when you sort of couple that with trauma, homelessness, different types of abuse, when they, you know, enter, you know, early adulthood, these I mean, symptoms can be so significant that it's so hard to try and unlearn these behaviors when we go back and look at the, you know, sort of the way the brain operates, right? But I mean, you know, coming from, you know, an Islamic lens, you know, part of our faith is that a part of the Quran and Sunnah is that we try our best to instill hope, to always be optimistic, and you know, we know that for every you know, sort of disease there's a cure, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
So on that particular note, I guess, you know, one question that comes to mind is, what broadly, in your experience, does the road to recovery sometimes look like? Like, what is the entry point to the road? What you said before, there's sometimes a ideal point in it when there's a certain type of impact that's about to happen. In your experience, what has that looked like? You know, where have you seen recovery happen, and what sort of triggered it? Was it a particular crisis? Was it the intervention of someone external? What does that look like for people?
Look, I think very deep down people do want to change. I think the desire to want to change, the desire to want to stop is key. It's very evident, you know, even in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. So that's key.
Yeah.
How the pathway is shaped can be based around circumstantial stuff. Some people get better in jail. Some people get worse in jail. Some people get good if their parents are strict. Some people don't. Some people respond differently. But the one thing that we do know is connection and genuine support and genuine care gets better results in the long term than mandating recovery.
Yeah.
There's research in, you know, around that stuff.
It's also important to note that, just touching based on that question, is that recovery looks different for you know, all individuals, depending on, you know, their cultures, depending on, you know, their values and their belief systems. So what may work for a particular community, whether it might be for the Vietnamese community or the those who are of the Jewish faith and whatnot, is that what works for them may look completely different to us. But from a sort of a clinical point of view, there are sort of you know, normal expectations for recovery. You know, so, you know, engaging in, you know, you observe the behavior, you engage in in therapy, you seek support, you talk to a learned person, or in other words, a professional. You have different treatment modalities or programs like rehab, day programs, and detox. But I mean, we have, when we speak about addiction, especially substance use, is we have, you know, self-imposed expectations, which, you know, for some it can lead to disappointment, where they set the bar high. This is how I might define recovery, and a loved one or a family member might say, look, if you stop using for, you know, if you go to engage in a program and you stop using for 3 months, that's it. You're recovered. You're healed. Unfortunately, you know, that's not always the case. Recovery, like I said, varies, and so it's important that we address recovery in a way where it's understandable, you know, to individuals and communities, because you know, it can lead to not only the disappointment, but it can lead to a lot of self-doubt and you know, feelings of unworthiness as well. Like
if it doesn't quite go to plan,
if it doesn't go,
yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
I think I just want to touch as well, like there's a, you know, we talk about strength-based approach, we talk about motivational interviewing. These are all, you know, best practice sort of models. And for someone that's Muslim, and Keds was just mentioned that, you know, recovery is based around values, it's shaped around identity, values. And when you want to have a strength-based approach, you need to understand the person's values to increase in that strength, right? If you want to do it in a motivational interviewing style, there's also things you could use from that culture, from that faith, that you can motivate the individual with. That's why it's so important to understand that culture and faith, when it comes to service provision, is so important. Not to assume.
Yeah.
I mean, from a practical point of view as well, it's really important to set realistic goals. And someone may define recovery as, you know what, I didn't have any obsessive thoughts in the morning. And to them, that's recovery.
Right.
Someone may have, you know, minimized their use of, for example, cocaine use from 5 times a week to 3. That's recovery.
Right.
And you know, for those who are struggling with any type of substance use dependency, is that you define your success. And recovery, again, is different for every person, right? When we're talking about it from, you know, being of, you know, as Muslim, having a Muslim faith as well, is that it's that holistic approach, right? And it's incorporating not only just our spirituality or deen, it's also incorporating the social aspect of things, you know, the psychological aspect. Are we meeting that need, as well as certain biological factors that may sort of impact someone's journey?
Yeah.
You know, they may have sort of been formally diagnosed with a mental health condition, which ended up being a co-occurring condition along that journey. So again, recovery is completely different for individuals.
What about the idea of holistic healing? What does healing look like holistically? Not just the sort of stopping the, like, as you sort of said, it can look different things for different people, but what's a wholesome recovery look like?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, with holistic healing, it's basically the interconnectedness and the incorporation of the mind, the body, and the soul. So what we do know, you know, us also being, you know, us being Muslims, is that you know, the prophetic approach was not to take things in isolation. So to meet, you know, the biological aspect, the psychological aspect, the social aspect, the cultural aspect, and the spiritual aspect, and one shouldn't be one extreme to another, right? And it's all about moderation. And you know, when we sort of look at, you know, even in Islamic history, is how they treated, you know, addictions or different types of, you know, mental illnesses, was that they had different interventions, and very similar to, you know, the Western interventions as well. You know, you can see a lot of similarities. What works best for, you know, what I've seen with my clients is auditory therapy, where even just listening to the Quran recitation,
Yep.
we see a significant
Subhanallah.
effectiveness in just preoccupying the mind or distracting the mind to something that it connects with naturally, even immersing in nature as well, right? And that could be going out near the water or
Yeah.
near the beach, and even practical cognitive strategies. We tend to minimize our thought processing and how complex it can be, right? And a part of the prophetic approach of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that he also was quite a rational person, and there was in conjunction with the emotional responsiveness too, and so how we approached it was by practicing mindfulness.
Yeah.
And how we do that
Which
is
is a big
through,
idea these days, isn't
is
it?
through the
Yeah.
afkar and the remembrance, but he didn't use that in isolation. He saw the importance of speaking to a friend, or speaking to his beloved wife, or speaking to those who were involved in the community, right? Or he spoke with direct contact to his Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so you could see with a part of that prophetic approach is also what we know as the prophetic medication or the sunnah, and there are many different types of things that can also benefit us as well.
Yeah.
But holistically is essentially just incorporating all factors and not taking in one thing in isolation
Yeah.
as recovery.
Yeah. Yeah. No, subhanallah, profound. What have you seen in your practical experience, Muhammad, in terms of the impact of these sorts of, I guess, well-rounded, holistic approaches to, getting people out of the situation that they're in?
Look, I'll keep it in the context of the community, the Muslim community. I think that a major aspect of it is giving the sense of identity back, creating a sense of purpose back. That's very, very, very profound. I find recently done surveys, to everyone that's been involved in the programs that we run, and that social connectedness and that returning back to the deen, or that sense of identity without being judged, was like the highest reason. But the holistic, I guess, approach, it's very clear, it's in the Quran, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وننزل من القرآن ما هو شفاء ورحمة للمؤمنين. There's other verses in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about that it's a healing, شفاء لما في الصدور. It's a healing to what's in the hearts.
Yeah.
Right? If you look at Bruce Lipton, for example, he talks about how the 50 trillion cells that are in your body respond to perception, okay? And how your environment asks of you to create a sense of perception around what's incoming and to deal with it, right? And he gave, there's a simple example, like if someone sees a snake, he'll jump and run, like, let's say, okay? But if a snake catcher sees a snake, his perception is different. His biological responses to the threat is different because of his perception changes, okay? And I think as Muslims, as we believe in La ilaha illallah, we have qada and qadar, we have rahmah, we have sabr, we have those strong spiritual concepts at the core of the faith. Those things change your perception about your life.
Yeah.
It changes your perception about what may or may not be a threat in life. And so that holistic healing from the deen, it's there. It's there. It's there. We're not tapping into it properly.
Yeah.
We're not tapping into it the way the Prophet ﷺ did,
Yeah.
him and his companions. And that's,
yeah, like you were saying, like, ultimately it shapes our identity, and I think, on a conscious level is that, we always think about, certain stories that might, motivate us with, for example, the companions or the Anbiya as well, and that concept of stories is, for us as being a Muslim faith, it can really increase that motivation, and that's the mental aspect of things. And with holistic healing as well, I mean, there's so many things like what Muhammad Finch was saying that we haven't tapped into, but it's also important that we address this as a Muslim community, so that we are aware of certain approaches we are aware of spaces where we can speak about this. We are aware of certain support groups that then offer that, you know, spirituality and connecting back to the deen. So there's so many, you know, there's so many things out there that can facilitate recovery.
Yeah, yeah, no,
And
absolutely.
this doesn't take away from the fact that we know we do evidence-based interventions. You know, we do relapse prevention plan. We do group counselling. You know, we do a lot of that one-on-one stuff as well. So, you know, in conjunction with everything else, like Tej was saying, you have to do
That stuff.
well, you know, and see whatever works, because people respond differently to different things.
Absolutely.
But the most one common thing is the aspect that the deen's included,
Yep.
and the problem is recognised and not judged and supported.
Yep. Yep. That's absolutely incredible. You talked about, you know, I mean, there's so many different things we could cover under that. Let's talk about community a little bit. The importance of community and a sense of having a network to tap into, and maybe it goes to the point that you were just making about judgment. Tell us about that a little bit, because look, you know, in our communities it goes both ways. One is that, you know, people are very much against the, there's a huge trend in broader society on almost every issue. It's like, don't judge me, right? You can't judge me. And then some Muslims respond to that by saying, you know what, under the guise of that, we've let everything through the door, right? There's nothing wrong anymore. Everything is just right. How do you find that balance?
Yeah.
And how do you sort of, you know, because sometimes people who are addicted are victims of circumstance and many of the other things that we talked about, like it's a chemical reaction that's not often in their own control. They've lost the ability to self-modulate behavior because it's a chemical thing. It's an impulse that, it's like a twitch almost, right? Not to belittle it, but, you know, so how do you sort of comment on that?
So there's a couple of things there. I mean, it's very, very, very important to also not take away the responsibility from the individual.
Yep.
Yes, they're going through stuff. Yes, but they're still conscious.
Because then you take away agency. Yeah.
They're still conscious decisions.
Yeah. Yeah.
May not be as controllable for the person, but they're still controlled decisions.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one. Number two, there's a very fine line between enablement and support, and
Yeah.
I'll talk to the families a lot about this.
Yes. Yes.
Very fine line. And someone that's in those behaviours, the lying, the manipulating, the cheating, the thing, just to get to the substance,
Yeah.
is very evident, it's very real, and it's very hard for the families to navigate. So, you know, yes, we're talking about the substance, and yes, and all this stuff, but there needs to be, you know,
A balance.
recognition of both, okay? And I think that's where a lot of families either get from the support to enablement
Yeah.
because of that level of, you know,
Bloodline.
it depends, yeah. And then sometimes it goes from support to like full neglect, reject, and judge and kick out of the house.
Yeah.
And there's so much you can do before that. So much you can do before that. Okay. The impact I think it has on, like, you know, you talk about community issues. Don't forget that the person themselves judges themselves in that situation. So there's a sense of stigma from the person going to the community. This is not always the community's fault, and this is not always the person's fault. If we don't provide the platform to break that stigma as a community, the person will never come out.
Yeah.
Because they already feel stigmatized, they already stigmatize themselves, there's a lot of shame and guilt, embarrassment, you know, this community is like this and I'm supposed to be like that, but I'm not. So how can I come and speak to them? But if I see a door open, wide open, I might just walk through that door and speak to someone. But because there's stigma from both ends. Definitely stigma from both ends.
Yeah.
It's so important, you know, just touching base. You know, Mohammed covered a lot of points. But I mean, you know, with, you know, any types of addiction or any types of hardship, is that creating an environment that's conducive to healing is going to contribute significantly. And, you know, from, you know, what I've seen with my clients as well is, you know, a part of their journey of recovery, it could be early stages or it could be late, but a part of that journey is the aftercare and the continuity of care as well. And when I look at the importance of community, I think about the support in those stages of recovery where, you know, they may not have employment, so trying to support someone in, you know, learning new skills and you know, gaining different types of employment that suits their needs and their capacity. They might be experiencing financial distress as well. So, you know, Allahumma barik, NZF is doing a fantastic job in supporting those who might be experiencing financial crisis. We talk about, you know, a lack of maybe social support or interactions with family as well. And, you know, the reason why community is so important is we can allow for the facilitation of these engagements, and it goes back down to that holistic approach. Although, you know, with many different types of communities, ultimately we live in a diverse community, and different cultures have you know, different you know, different sort of you know, for example, their religion or their gender, which it makes up that intersectionality, you know, and ultimately for, you know, our Muslim community is that individuals, from what I've worked with in the space, you know, because what Muhammad Finch stated, that self-stigmatization, it deters them away from even accessing help, when for the most part there are some services out there, right? But it's because of that shame, you know, around going out and reaching out for help. However, of course, there are ways to try that we can improve this, and, you know, by creating services that are culturally responsive, by collaborating even with different communities, and we can, you know, sort of liaise on what works and what doesn't work, right? And you know, in the context of the Muslim community, is trying to increase that literacy of understanding what substances are and what that journey looks like.
Let's talk about an important point that I want to touch on before we finish. I'm conscious of time. Let's talk about stories of hope, right, and recovery. The very topic or the name of today's episode was "I'm addicted. Can I get over this?" Let's answer that question. Can people get over this? Can people get over their addictions, Mohammed? What would you say in the most succinct way possible?
Absolutely. And if you want evidence, you're looking at it.
SubhanAllah.
I have a lived experience, which is what allows the motivation, I guess, where this motivation stems from. And so, you know, I've had a good few years of lived experience. I've done my practical, if you like, prior to my theory, right? And learned the hard way, if you like. So it's definitely, like I said, I think the survey that we just done last week or the week before, we just finished it, and I think we looked at how many people stopped using completely. Out of the probably 70 people that have attended the program once or less, so for the rehab project, for the Connect, Discover, Recover program, just the program itself, for the last 18 months we've had over 100 people. Today was 101 registrations for the program, of interest. Okay. Now, obviously, people at different stages of their readiness to change. So out of those 100, I would say maybe 15 would have registered and not showed up. This is according to the stats that we've collected. Out of those, the remaining 85, 15 would have probably registered, came once, never showed up again. So you left with what, 60 there roughly, and those 60 come and go at any given moment. And out of those 60, we've got like 20 or 30 that are regular brothers that, you know, engage with the program. And out of those, we've had, in the last survey, 16 stopped using completely, 3 reduced by 50%, and then a few that's still sort of lingering, you know. We've had brothers go and do a complete detox, and, you know, detoxes that we refer people to. We have relationships with, you know, Kurila Lodge and things like that. So if you want to know hope, of course it's there. Alhamdulillah. But I actually do want to mention this before I go on. Tex triggered me when he was talking about the holistic approach and the different aspects of it. The Alcohol and Drug Foundation did a beautiful research. It's called the Life Cycle Planner, and what it talks about is the age bracket of the individual, what the risks are, and what the protective factors are. So what the risk factors are for that individual. It could be social, it could be employment, it could be health, it could be connection, it could be community, family, right? At different ages of, because different age, the dynamic is different, you know, their needs are different. And so we looked at that, and we have a strong connection and relationship with the Alcohol and Drug Foundation, and we sort of tailored some programs around the age groups that come to the program to what are protective factors in their life. And a lot of it is, the older the person is, the more it's connection with, you know, and it's a beautiful research done by the Alcohol and Drug Foundation. It's called the Life Cycle Planner. But in terms of what you're talking about, is there hope? You know, when there's a will, there's a way. It could take 10 times, it could take 100 times.
Yep.
And we always say, you know, as long as you have the desire to stop, reach out.
Yep. Yep. Tex, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, the whole essence of, you know, motivation and, you know, positive behavioral change is to instill the, you know, the hope and the element of being optimistic, right? And, you know, from in an Islamic context, is that what we know, which soothes the heart and provides, you know, relief for the grief that we're facing, is that there is a cure for every disease, and you know, in my line of work, I've seen, you know, clients who have been able to maintain sobriety for 2 or 3 years, right? Individuals who have maintained, you know, abstinence from maybe one particular substance when there was a combination of it for a couple of weeks or a couple of days.
Good point.
You know, and it goes back down to that positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
You know, like Allahumma barik, like people have different tests and different calamities, and I mean, this journey of recovery, it may look like something that's you know, never ending, but I mean, there is hope, and there are people who have done it, and there are people who still maintain engagement in therapy, just as to act as a motivation to maintain that abstinence. But alhamdulillah, I have seen in my line of work, you know, plenty of individuals who, you know, are, you know, constantly working hard and determined to maintain, you know, sobriety.
Yeah.
It's not a destination, it's a journey.
Yeah.
Always remember, it's
Yeah.
never a destination.
Yeah.
It's never a moment where you say, that's it,
Yeah.
I'm recovered, that's it. It's never like that.
If there was one piece of advice you would give to someone who is addicted to something,
Yeah.
I want one from each of you, the top advice that you think they could take away, and if you sort of had your wish and people could act on it, you think it would be the most beneficial thing on their journey to recovery, what would you say that is?
Well, it's a hard question.
Yeah. One, because I know you could give 100 tips, but give me
Yeah.
one. If there's an addict or someone, you know, with an addiction in front of you, and you could give them one thing that they could practically take away, and if they acted on, you think it would have, you know, a great chance of pulling them in the right direction, what would that be, in your view?
I would say identify what the relationship with the drug is. You know, what's the relationship with the substance? Be honest about it. Honesty is key. I think that's where recovery starts, is with honesty.
Yeah.
Once you understand the relationship with the substance, what it's doing for you, what the world is not doing for you,
Yeah.
then you will at least start to look at what can I get from the world that I'm getting from the substance. I can't get it from the substance no more.
Yeah.
It's wrecking my whole life. So you need to be honest in that relationship, in that space, in the happy medium.
Discover what the underlying driver is,
Allah,
yeah? Yeah. And take the race up.
Man, there's so many things that come into my mind.
I know it's hard.
SubhanAllah, but I mean, and again, advice is given, and it can be different to certain people depending on the stage. But I mean, the way I would frame it to those who are, you know, who are struggling with it is, I mean, with substance use is, I know it hurts and I know it's so hard, but to go back on maintaining that hope, there's support out there. You know, your loved ones care about you, your family care about you, and there is support out there where they're tailored to your needs. They meet, they maintain, you know, confidentiality, and we genuinely, you know, want to provide that support for you. And it's that collaborative approach, it's that partnership that you're not alone, we're in this together, inshallah.
Inshallah.
I just want to say one more thing
Yeah,
before
sure.
we end. I think, inshallah, it's NZF, you know, a lot of courage to do this work, taking on initiatives to do this kind of work. Support them, because they will eventually support the organisations that are doing this on the ground, inshallah. And just think about it. If I just thought about this before, you know, 16 people, alhamdulillah, stopped using.
Alhamdulillah.
That's 16 families.
Yeah, subhanallah.
Mothers, sisters, brothers, employment, health,
It's a massive
social.
thing.
Like,
Subhanallah.
Yeah.
just thought about it.
Yeah. Incredible, isn't it? It's
Akbar.
hundreds of people possibly.
Allahu
that's-
Akbar.
Subhanallah.
Yeah. And it's hard work from the boys that are doing it, from the brothers that are doing it. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. May Allah reward them, may Allah reward you.
Allah, yeah.
Amazing stuff.
Ameen.
Amazing
Ameen.
stuff. So keep it up, brothers. It's really you're at the cutting edge of something very, very important to our community.
And we need the support. We need the support. We can't do it. We've got full-time jobs. We've got families of our own,
Mm.
and this is a part-time thing. You know, we do this part-time. We do, so we definitely need the support. We definitely need the support.
And, you know, hopefully the partnership of organisations like NZF gives you some of that support.
Inshallah ta'ala.
It opens up doors and networks and so forth to be able to have an even greater impact on people's lives,
Inshallah.
inshallah. So just want to say Jazakumullah khair once again
Wa iyaakum.
for joining us here today. Hopefully, you know, some of the discussions that we've had, brothers and sisters, you know, people take some of this stuff away and it can really trigger the right thoughts. If there's even one person that's going through an issue and they hear something tonight, and you know, it causes them to go down a line of inquiry or action that helps become the difference, then that entire campaign that NZF has done would be worth it for that one person, subhanAllah. So we ask Allah to accept the efforts of the brothers and sisters at NZF, of our brothers Tegs and Muhammad. Jazakumullah khair, brothers, for coming on once again. And to the rest of the brothers and sisters who joined us, thank you so much for joining us. Please do share this episode with other brothers and sisters that you know may be going through this, or family members of theirs, or anyone really that can benefit, because you know we have seen it's incredible the stories we have heard as a result of some of these episodes. SubhanAllah, I was in Melbourne not long ago. I live in Sydney. The show is usually done out of our Sydney studio here, but I was in Melbourne just for some business related stuff, and a brother pulled me up at a masjid. Obviously I have no idea who he is, right? He pulled me up, brother, are you the guy who hosts Real Talk, right? And then he goes on and tells us a story about how as a result of something that someone said on a panel, what impact it had on him and his family. And I'm just like, subhanAllah, the way Allah works is absolutely incredible, you know. So it gets out there, it gets in the community, and there are people benefiting that we could not even imagine. So we ask Allah to just, you know, proliferate that 100-fold and to make it of benefit. So
There's a verse
yes,
in the Quran,
yes.
Allah, in Surah Ibrahim,
Yes.
Allah gives the parable of a good word like a tree. أصلها ثابت وفرعها في السماء. That the parable of a good word is like a tree, solid roots, and you know the branches
leaves,
are in the
yes,
tree, and it
yeah.
gives leaves and fruits.
SubhanAllah. You
Wherever
just don't know where
you
it
don't
goes.
know.
Yeah, you don't know where it
You
goes.
don't know.
Absolutely.
SubhanAllah.
Absolutely. So you know, really thankful for brothers and sisters to share, and you know that could be your sadaqah jariyah, and of course don't forget, you know, with Jum'ah now almost upon us, do consider giving to NZF and supporting this campaign, supporting its work in this space, so that it's able to impact even more lives for the better, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair once again, brothers and sisters. We will see you in January for our next Real Talk episode. We now take a break for the rest of the year, but we'll be back with more hard-hitting and important conversations that hopefully benefit yourselves, benefit the community, and help us make a small difference that could go a long way in helping people. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك ونشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت استغفرك ونتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.